Welcome to the OddsBreakers, number one place for shared, sharp betting information.
Welcome back to podcast 58 of 2021. I'm your host, Kiev O'Neill. Follow me on Twitter at OBKiev. Follow us at The OddsBreakers. Follow us on social media / The OddsBreakers. This episode is being sponsored by footballcontest.com. To get your entry into the Las Vegas $1 Million Football Contest, please visit Football Contest. Let him know the OddsBreakers sent you. You do not have to live in Las Vegas to do it. You can live anywhere in the world and get into these massive $1 million contests. If you'd like to help us out with our costs, sponsor the website and podcast, we would love to help you out. Please visit theoddsbreakers.com, click shop, and become a member. Pick any handicapper to support us and get their premium plays before the line moves. If nothing else, please visit theoddsbreakers.com and become a free picks newsletter subscriber. My friends, we have a massive show for you today because Brad Powers from BradPowersSports.com is coming on the show to break down college football week 1. We're going to have some questions for Brad, talk a little bit about his power ratings, talk a little bit about his love for the sport. We're going to talk about a lot of big games this weekend, possibly give out some plays. Super excited for that. There is no NFL football this weekend. We'll get back into those lines later. We already made some plays on those lines. Some of those lines moved. But this is all about college football and a little bit about UFC because at the end of the show, I'm going to give out a play on UFC Fight Night on ESPN, Brunson versus Till. So very excited to do that. Before I get into that, if you're about to make a deposit bonus and you can get a free bet, we wrote an article at theoddsbreakers.com on how you can guarantee money from your free bet. It's a must-do if that's the way you want to approach it. There's other ways of getting bonuses where you have to roll over your money. A lot of people just decide to do the free bet because there's usually no rollover. Check out Bents, Infos, and Trends at theoddsbreakers.com, and we show you exactly how to guarantee money from your free bet. Before I have Brad on the show, guys, I want to stress the importance of bankroll management. I know we only talk about it once a year, but it's the most important thing when it comes to sports betting because the best sports bettors are literally between 54% and 60% accurate long term. They go through ebbs and flows. You know, you can get a good return on investment at 56%, higher than the stock market, way higher than your banknotes. That's why I like to call this sports investing. We invest in knowledge, and somebody manages your account when you have somebody that you're following for plays. So, importance about bankroll management is that no matter how much money you have, 1% of that should only be 1 unit, and you should never bet more than 5 units per play. Okay? So basically, you can have weekends where you have 15 to 20 bets going, lose almost all of them, right? Really put a dent in your bankroll, especially if they're 2 or 3 unit plays. Or you could have big weekends with 2 or 3 unit plays and win most of them. But most importantly, if you get in a rut, you have plenty of money to come back the next week without having to dump more money into it from being irresponsible. You know, I mean, anything can happen in college football. You saw Syracuse beat Clemson at 24-point dogs a couple years ago. We saw Wisconsin lose to Illinois, my Badgers, as 31-point dogs. There's absolutely nothing guaranteed in this business, so I stress bankroll management. 1 star means 1 unit. Some people like to play a little bit higher, 4 or 5 star bets a lot. I like the 1.5 to 3 star bets personally, and if there's something really valuable, I'll go with 4. And if I know something that nobody else knows, which is extremely rare, I will throw out a 5 unit play. Maybe it happens a couple times a year. But it is so important to manage your bankroll because it's also a peace of mind. You want to feel good about what you're doing. You want to feel confident coming into every single week without feeling in the dumps. You don't want this to affect your family life when you're sports betting. You don't want it to affect your personal life, right? You want to always be, happy all the time. You don't want any stress. Playing low units gives you low stress. If you start with $1,000, your unit size is $10. If you start with $10,000, your unit size is $100. And if you start with $100,000, your unit size is $1,000, and so on. That's how it should be, and I cannot stress the importance of it. So remember that. And there's a sports betting article, Intro to Sports Betting 101, at the same place on theoddsbreakers.com if you want to learn a little bit about football betting as well as the importance of bankroll management. My friends, now it's time to get Brad Powers on. So without further ado, Mr. Brad Powers from Brad Powers Sports. Now I'm very excited to welcome, for the first time to the OddsBreakers, a man I've followed for, longer than I can remember. I mean, you know him from radio shows and podcasts all across the country. If you even bet on college football, you know this man. I'd like to welcome Mr. Brad Powers from Brad Powers Sports to the OddsBreakers. You can follow him on Twitter at BradPowers7. Brad, man, thanks for finally coming on the show. I know you're extremely busy this time of year. How's this week been treating you?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the busiest week of the entire year for me. Not only, trying to get down and kind of get in the flow of college football season, getting bets down, but also late injuries. I mean, it seems, coming out of fall camps, I mean, this is the one week where you get surprised by some news, and then you get people, when you run a service, you got people signing up for the whole year. Of course, they wait until, the day of the game start. They had all summer, but yeah, this is the busiest week of the year, but I'll tell you, it's great excitement. I love it.
Yeah, super excitement. I mean, injury news coming out, like people that are not even playing the game for their team will be coming out too. Yep. It's stuff to be careful for, but I like to bet early and like to bet late, and you always do a great job chasing the circle lines down, and I always listen to your stuff about that. It's the best way to go. Variance can happen on either side, but I know that a lot of my listeners, Brad, has followed you for a very long time. But whomever doesn't really know your background, could you just share a little bit of history about you and your approach to sports betting?
Oh, wow. It goes back about 15 years ago. I got out of college, it started in sports radio. I mean, I was a broadcast journalism major, started in sports radio in Toledo, and after about a year, we were the Detroit Tigers affiliate, so that was most of the discussion. I got sick and tired of talking Detroit Tigers baseball at that point. So I decided, I'm like, man, I want to talk college football, like year-round. So, closest place to me was Phil Steele. So I got a job there. This was over a decade ago, and, that I was aware of the sports betting aspect. I mean, I ran pools. I did some betting, but I found out real quick on what pays for Phil Steele's preview magazine. It was the handicap and gambling side of things, North Coast Sports. So that it kind of introduced me to everything there, and then away we went. After a few years there, they found out that I was pretty good, knew my stuff, and then became one of the lead handicappers there, and then. After 5-6 years there, I decided to go out on my own, move to Vegas because, I became more of a bettor. So, I mean, at that point, and this is pre-legalization and whatnot, Vegas was the only place in the country where you could legally place a bet in a sports book. So, yeah, I mean, that was 5-6 years ago, and here I am now.
Well, let's talk about this then. It's awesome how your approach came that the Tigers, I don't even know if Cabrera was signed for that mega deal yet, but that's probably that.
Yeah, it was around that time, yeah. Verlander was basically like a rookie type stuff. I mean, it's been that long ago.
That's a long time. But college football, how did your love happen for college football? Was it always there, even before you started working for the Tigers, and more than the NFL?
It's always been there. I grew up in a family where we had season tickets to, Notre Dame. So, I mean, and believe it or not, I wasn't a Notre Dame fan. I lost my fanship for Notre Dame was a lost bet. I bet my dad. It was the USC Notre Dame game, and at that time, Notre Dame was in the midst of beating SC like 13 consecutive years. And I just made a bet. I was like, if SC couldn't beat Notre Dame this year, I think Tom Marinovich was the quarterback. I mean, that's how long ago it was. I said I'll become a Notre Dame fan. So, yeah, and from that point forward, it's been all college football. And then being in Toledo, I mean, we're 2 hours away from Ohio State, 2 hours away from Notre Dame, less than an hour away from Michigan. I mean, that's 3 of the top 10 programs in the country historically. So, I mean, that's where the love was there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think some of the other things that you'd agree with me upon is just how the games mean so much to these kids, right?
Yep.
You know, comparing it to the NFL, you can have a 2-loss team, you know, not put their best effort in week 10, week 11, something like that. College football, winning the conference, getting into the playoffs, every little aspect of it is so important. And there's less games, so they just try their asses off every single time. You know, it's more...
Yep.
You can see it in their eyes and their belief of how much they care from a game to game basis, because every game's almost a rivalry, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I love a sense of urgency in college football. I worry about the future of it, that every game won't mean as much. I mean, I come to win, whether it's, you know, a game of Uno or, you know, a college football game. I want to win it every single time I take the field or sit at the table. So I appreciate that about college football. You know, I went to a lot of games as a kid. I even went to like Lions games, big Lions games, Thanksgiving games. There's a Monday night game. I went when they played the Raiders and Bo Jackson. And to me, nothing compared to, even as a young kid, I realized, you know, the college game, going to it, the atmosphere is just totally different. I mean, that's what intrigued me most about it. Is just, I mean, I challenge anybody, go to a game and go to a college campus. And it's just the game is just, you know, it's a separate entity. I mean, you don't even have to like football to enjoy the atmosphere on a major college campus.
Absolutely. Even on the smaller ones, because my dad, before I went to school at UW-Madison, my dad used to take me to Northwestern games, and I thought those were more exciting than some of the Cubs games I used to go to, and even the Bears games. I'm like, wow, everyone's screaming, they're chanting, there are bands playing everywhere, just way different atmosphere. Everyone's having fun in the parking lot, and that's just I back then as a kid, I thought that stadium was bigger than all the other ones, but it wasn't. You know, it just wasn't. But it felt that way. But that's the kind of feeling that I got every time I went to a college football game. And of course, when I went to Madison, everything that trumped everything. I became a Badger, and graduated there, and obviously was a big Badger follower and Badger fan. But sometimes some of the teams you like cause you to be a sports bettor, because I've been a Cubs fan and a Bears fan my whole life, and watching those teams, and you don't have any fun doing it unless you're betting. So every single game you bet on means more than watching a losing team, and so that's kind of how I started, caring about other games and things like that, and of course fantasy football and all that. So that's probably true for a lot of people around the Cleveland area, from what I'm hearing as well. Some of our colleagues that we talked to.
Oh yeah.
A lot of sports bettors from there. So I'm a user of your information in newsletters. It's fantastic. It seems to come out so fast. When do you begin preparation for your college football season after the last champion's been crowned?
Well, believe it or not, I start that night. I mean, I actually got an idea because, I mean, keep in mind the sports books open up the futures that night usually, or the day of the game type of thing. And I need to at least have an idea of who I think can, make a run at it at all. I mean, I'm not going to know the ins and outs of how good Western Kentucky's going to be, but I need to know if this is going to be the year where Oklahoma finally makes a run. And so it's right about that point I dip my toe. But as far as like full-time every single day, I mean, I start in April. I mean, right when the Final Four is hitting, because my basketball is done at that point, it's full-time for me. I mean, you got spring practices and whatnot. And, I have to start in April because, I mean, everybody releases win totals now. Week 1, all this stuff is, late May into June. And you got to be mostly ready at that point. I mean, you're mostly not ready until, the end of summer, but I got to have a clue because I'm making bets that time of year.
Yeah, and that's probably why your stuff's coming out so early, and that's why I love it too. Because the May, the June, it used to be with Five Dines coming out with June, but obviously they're gone. But now other companies are jumping in and doing it. You got to get on these things early, and they'll move a lot from a futures and a win totals perspective. So that's why I love your information so much. If you don't follow Brad, make sure you check him out at Brad Powers 7. So same thing, man. That's great. You do a fantastic job there. I have a beginner's question for you. A little bit more of a beginner's question, but I want you to describe to our listeners the importance of power ratings, and especially in college football, and how they make an impact on your beginning of your approach every week.
Well, the right word to use there was beginning. I mean, it's the starting point of any handicap on any game. I mean, I want to know what my power rating says. I mean, because I'm a better, kind of first and foremost at this point now. I used to be a handicapper first. Now I'm a better first. I mean, I got to have an idea when these openers come up at Circa Sunday morning. I mean, I got to have at least a power ratings line on the game. I might not have the specifics, as far as the situation and injury reports and all that go into a handicap, but to me, the power ratings, and they become more and more important to me as I've gotten better at making them. I mean, there's a lot of good free power ratings that are out there if you're wanting to get started, say it's the off season, whatnot. But for me, I'm almost everything's about my power rating at this point, whether it's a betting season win totals, game of the years. I mean, all those bets that I make early in the year are just pure power ratings. I'm not diving into the specific handicap of history or whatnot of the series. So, I mean, I can't emphasize enough. It is a starting point. Sometimes, I mean, it's just I don't go against my power ratings a lot. And if I do, it's got everything else has to line up for me to go against the power rating. That's how important it is to me.
Well, there's also nothing worse than going against your power rating and taking a loss, and you're like kicking yourself. That. Yeah. That's the word. I mean, that's almost as bad as a bad beat, man. Like a really nasty bad beat, punt fumble or something that could happen to you. But I totally get what you're saying, and I start with my power ratings pretty early. I think I used to look at every year I look at Bill Connelly's stuff, even though it was a little off this year. Bill Connelly's returning production was a little off from what really happened.
Yeah, it was.
And I don't want to rip on Bill because he does a great job.
I love Bill.
And I wish he updated his returning productions that he comes out in February. I wish he had that like June or July update, but he's a busy man. So, I rely on the Phil Steele magazine, the Athlon, and the Lindy's and all that good stuff. Whatever else information we can get. But I do the same thing. Everything's derived from your actual power rating. And it takes me a lot to go away from it. But the advice I want to give to listeners about the power rating, it's heavy stuff. You have to do box score study every single Sunday morning, and that's what I do. You study every box, and then I release my misleading final scores, my betting spots if someone's got possibly a letdown and things like that, articles like that. But that's where I get that information. But it takes a lot of time. So if you don't have the time, I even recommend using some of the Sagarins out there and team rankings and things like that, because at least, you have a good gauge of where it's going. And, if you want to cut that time out, you can use some of the other aspects to handicap. Would you agree with that?
Oh, totally agree with that. I mean, it does take time, especially, if you're not going to do a specific conference, Power 5, if you want to do all 130 teams, it consumes a lot of time. So, I think Bill's SP Plus is a very good free power rating that's out there in the market. It has market influence in some instances. Jeff Sagarin's been around since the BCS. So, that's another one. Is it the end all to be all? No, but it's a good jumping off point if you don't have time to do your own.
Absolutely. And it's a great way to compare them, because I compare mine to them. And, I'm not the smartest man in the room, and that's not the way I ever approach my life. I always want to try to find information. So if you are doing yourself, God bless you. I would still compare it, but there's some really good free ones that use a lot of great efficiencies out there. Well, Brad, let's get into some games then, my man. It looks like we have college football every single night all the way through Monday. What's up with that?
Love it. And college football should take advantage of it. It's the one week where there is an NFL. It's even more so this year because there's even no preseason week of NFL. They, starting Wednesday night, they should take advantage. In fact, they should have started probably on Monday night, to be honest with you. They should have a game every night. So, they take advantage of Labor Day weekend. It should be the kickoff. And the good thing about this year specifically, this is not, the recency bias. This isn't, hyping it up, more than it should be. This is legitimately the deepest and best week one of college football we've ever had, whether it's ranked unranked matchups, whether it's, I would say compelling games that maybe even the teams aren't ranked, whether it's like a Purdue, Oregon State, matchups like that where you're going to learn a lot about both teams coming off a year where you didn't have any non-conference games. I forget the betting side of things. Just as a fan, this should be an outstanding week.
You get a good gauge of your conference watching this week and how it's going to go through the season 100%. The games that they put out this week are massive. And why not get into one in the Big Ten that's going to be highlighting our Thursday night? You have Ohio State versus Minnesota. And I have Minnesota about a 14-point favorite right here. I have the total around 63. What is your thoughts on this game? Have you got a chance to take a look at it?
Yeah, so I mean, my numbers have the Buckeyes right around 2 touchdowns. I think it's probably closer to 13, but I mean, I didn't step in, and I wouldn't recommend betting the Minnesota, just me personally, because I think there is a gap between the two teams. What I did get involved in this game is I bet the under. And if you follow along, conference games tend to be, at least early on in the season, lower scoring than your other non-conference games. Teams, obviously know one another. Maybe not necessarily the case here in Ohio State, Minnesota, but I just think, it's an important game. It's a conference game. Ohio State's very inexperienced, obviously, at quarterback. They'll feel their quarterback out. I don't expect the Buckeyes to throw it 50 or 60 times. And then Minnesota's going to have a chance in this game. How are they going to have a chance? It's going to be by running the football. They're going to have to, lean on their very experienced offensive line, all 5 returning starters, a really good running back in Ibrahim. And obviously, what's the best way to defend Ohio State's offense? Probably keeping them off the field. So I ended up betting, 67. I think gave it out 65.5. Even still at 64, 63 would lean under.
Yeah, I mean, that thing definitely went down. And right now, I mean, getting in front of Ohio State's always a scary thing. There's many times that we regretted that, especially then the Alabamas. But I mean, this game is going to tell us something about C.J. Stroud. I'm pretty sure they announced him as a starting quarterback for Ohio State, and they lost some key players like everybody: Baron Browning, Pete Werner, Sean Wade on defense. But they reload. They're always one of the top recruiting teams. Minnesota lost their 2 top guys, Rashad Bateman, wide receiver Benjamin St-Juste, I believe at safety there. But they do at least have Tanner Morgan here. And now that this spread is a little bit low, I would consider looking at something maybe in the derivative markets if you have to bet it. I'm going to watch this line go up because I think that you're going to see some big game of the night, Thursday night, Ohio State money coming in. I would be shocked this goes to 17 here, which could mean.
Really? Well, I don't know if I see that.
Okay, well, it's at 14 right now, right? So I'm not going to put my stamp on that, but I wouldn't be shocked is what I'm saying. I'll predict 15.5. I'll predict 15.5.
All right.
But
I think maybe some very public books might move to 14.5, but I think the sharper side's probably the Gophers here. And I'll be surprised if most books come off of 14, to be perfectly honest with you.
Okay, well, there you go. I just looked at it as one of the outlier games because of that, a very heavily bet game. So it's going to be interesting who's right on that. What I will say is that Minnesota had a horrible start last year, and some people might be thinking about that. It doesn't matter to me that they did, but I liked how they finished last year against Purdue. Yep. I like they beat Nebraska. They really kept up with Wisconsin in that Axe game. Wisconsin had to fight to overtime and hit a field goal to get that Axe, and I was surprised. My power rankings have Ohio State minus 12.5, but I don't want to necessarily mess with them. But the derivative market pushes this thing solid 7.5 type thing. If this thing does get to the 15s, I would consider maybe a first half play on the Gophers. No play for me right now, Brad.
And I would, if I had to play anything, it'd be the under for me right now.
All right, so the under at 63 is Brad's lean. He already has a much more favorable number than that. So always hats off to Brad for the early lines. Hey, man, you're on the right side of the moves most of the time. So that's the important thing.
I would say 90% now. That's probably the best that I'm at. I mean, anything can happen during the game, but I think I'm not a big ego guy, but I'm world class to get in front of a line move.
Jesus, man, I'm happy to be at 65, 70% on the in front of the line moves. That is a fantastic number there, 90%. Friday, let's get into another big game here, ACC action, and this one's tempted me a little bit. Not gonna lie, I didn't make a play yet, but North Carolina versus Va Tech here, and Va Tech is plus 5.5. The total on this is about 64. Another pretty high total, but you have an early conference game. North Carolina, they got better. They're not just a basketball school now. The MAC there, they are a football school, and they did really well beating up the smaller schools in the ACC, but they kind of choked last year against the bigger names like Notre Dame and A&M in the bowl game, and and even Florida State with their name. They should have, I cannot believe that happened to them. Getting blown out like 31 was it 31-0 in the first half? It was either that or 28-0 in the first half.
Yeah, I think it was like 28-0, something like that.
And
they rallied, probably could have won the game. Wide receivers dropped touchdown passes at the end.
Yeah, another quarter they should have won that game, but still, they dropped a game to Florida State, and Florida State, obviously, brand new team this year. They lost some of their key guys like Chaz Surratt. They lost their 2 top running backs, and they have that small void at linebacker. Yeah, Surratt's the linebacker. So they lost their 2 top receivers, but they still got Sam Howell. And they've got some pretty good recruits over there. But Von Tech isn't without their losses. They lost Khalil Herbert to the NFL. One of their quarterbacks left in Hendon Hooker. He transferred, I thought, to Tennessee, but I don't even think he got. I don't think he got the starting job. I think.
Milton's the starter at Tennessee.
Yeah, the Michigan transfer, Milton, was just named the starter today or yesterday, I believe, not long ago, anyway. But even though I was kind of low on the Hokies, that's the game. I'm going to lean with the Hokies at home. It's a later game. I think it's 6 or 7 o'clock. So you're going to feel some of that night game atmosphere. My power ratings actually tell me to bet the Hokies because I'm only at UNC -3. So from my power rank perspective, that's what it says. But I didn't make a play yet, Brad.
Yeah, I didn't make a play either. And I'm not afraid to make plays. I think I bet I'm involved in at least half the games already. I'm right around 5.5. I want to lean North Carolina. To me, I just trust Sam Howell more. I trust the recruiting that Mac Brown's done. I don't have a good vibe about Virginia Tech. I just think the program is trending in the wrong direction. They've already had depth issues up front on the defensive side of the ball. They've lost some guys even post-spring. Well, here's what's keeping me off and making a bet right now in North Carolina. It's the atmosphere. I mean, you didn't have atmospheres last year, and now you're going to be opening up the season. Enter Sandman, Lane Stadium should be rocking. Night game. That's the only thing keeping me from betting North Carolina. But I lean Tar Heels here. I'm not a big fan of Burmeister at quarterback for Virginia Tech, and I'm not a big fan of Justin Fuente, to be perfectly frank with you.
Yeah, right. Fuente. I agree. I think that here's the thing. Sam Howell's got a lot of history on him now. I mean, I remember he was getting hyped up his first year. Then he had last year. He's been through this before. He could go through there and cut them up possibly as well. So not a lot of. I agree with you that the atmosphere keeps me off of them. But I mean, my power ratings say this way. Going to stay off the game just with the small lean to Virginia Tech based on the atmosphere. Let's move on to Saturday then. Something in the Big Ten that we can look at. The Big Ten is my conference because I love it so much. And, you're pretty close to Big Ten land yourself. And going to look at Indiana versus Iowa. And Iowa's laying about 3 points. The total on this is 45.5. I think I might come up with a play, but I want to see what you have first.
I don't have anything on this one. I think sharper money's been on the under. I'm sorry. I would lay 3 with Iowa. I'll tell you that. I mean, Iowa, the thing that worries me with Iowa is they're generally a slow starting type of team under Kirk Ferentz. And, you look at last year, even starting 0-2 on the season before they got really hot. Both teams, I think, are legitimate, not only top 25 from an AP poll perspective, but I think Indiana's also – Iowa's obviously in my top 25, but Indiana's breathing down the door. They're top 25 in a Vegas power rating. You don't say that about Indiana football too often. This is more of a game where you're going to learn a lot about both teams, coming from this game. I'd lay 3 with Iowa, and it's kind of maybe a take 4.5 with Indiana right now, with the line mainly being maybe 3.5. I think it's a pass for me at this point.
All right, passing for Brad. But what you kind of tempted me to what I was going to say at the end of my handicap here. Hoosiers way overachieved from what their numbers actually showed, in my opinion. I mean, minus 0.47 yards per play. As a matter of fact, that last year, I believe, was the first time any conference had their second and third best teams, both negative yards per play. I'm sure COVID played a part in that as well. But it was just a very strange year. Officiated. Herman really learned how to massage the officials. So good for him. I seen it. He really voiced his concerns last year against some of the bigger games, against like the Wisconsins and against the Ohio States. I thought his head was going to pop off, Brad, watching him a little bit. But I mean, 6-2, great record. But I'll tell you this: Ole Miss really sniffed them out at that bowl game.
Oh yeah, they did.
Holy cow! I was lucky to bet a larger bet on Stevie Scott getting over like 91 yards, and I think he got like 95 yards rushing in that one. But I definitely lost the side because I really thought Indiana was the side in that, and I was absolutely wrong. But Michael Penix did miss a few games, and Tuttle came in, as we all know. Even as overachievers, they do return a lot of guys, and that's what scares me.
Everybody does this year.
Yeah, yep. Everybody does. Everybody does. The Hawkeyes return a decent amount of guys too, and their quarterback, Petrus. But they're shifting their offensive line around a little bit too.
Yep.
So that
defensive line as well.
Yeah, and that's what keeps me. The trenches keep me a little concerned because Indiana could hit them in the mouth.
Yep.
And that worries me. Now, I mean, net yards per play, they're plus 1.08 last year. They had the 2 hiccups early against Northwestern, and I can't remember their other loss. It was a bad one. It's a game they probably shouldn't have lost. But then they run six in a row. Lost
to Purdue.
That's it. That was the first game.
Yeah.
Horrible loss.
And then Northwestern. Games that they could easily won. But I'll tell you, after that, people don't realize this, but Iowa was a top 10 team by the end of last year. And I think what hurt some of the excitement coming into this season is the Michigan game, a game they would have been a double-digit favorite, and the bowl game where they were a double-digit favorite against Missouri. I mean, they would have won those 2 games, entered this year on an 8-game winning streak. I think they'd be getting a little bit more love in the marketplace if that was the case.
Yeah, I would think so too. And they're not right now. And I'll be honest with you, Brad, they are higher in my power rings than Wisconsin by a half point.
Oh, really? That's a stunner.
I'm serious. It's hard for me to admit that, but they are barely ahead of Wisconsin. A good thing for Wisconsin is they get them at home. But, yeah. I look at them, and they've been powerful last year. They were the positive net yards per play. Wisconsin had COVID problems. There wasn't that many COVID problems. It was their 2 receivers. They were banged up. Graham Mertz looked lost, and he lost confidence until that final game against Wake Forest, man. Wisconsin jumped a bunch of their routes and scored a bunch of defensive touchdowns. That's really what happened. They got outgained.
Sam Hartman for Wake Forest didn't throw a pick all year and then threw like 4 in a 10-minute period.
Dude, I bet there was so many bets on freaking Wake Forest that game. And and they were using that at the handicap too. I might have bet them. I don't even remember. But Wisconsin, I think it has more upside than Iowa. But I do have Iowa the slightly better team. But my power rating discrepancy, I have them 3 points better than Indiana. And
then at home, so you got to be taking Iowa.
I'm probably going to. But I just saw it go from 3.5 down to 3 at a book. So I'm just kind of sitting a little bit. I'm probably going to be a player on Iowa. So that's where I was getting into before this. As long as they don't get punched in the mouth too hard. But I think Petrus could also be a quarterback that could be making a huge step up this year. Let's move into UTSA versus Illinois, keeping it in the Big Ten. Illinois minus 5.5, and over/under is totals at 49. And I'll start here. Illinois, very impressive for the fact that they beat. The first game Bielema came in, the fact that they won that game. That was the impressive thing to me. They did what was right in the red zone, which shocked me a little bit. And even though they were outgained by 70 yards or so against Nebraska, they won the game. I didn't think Brett Bielema was going to be that much of a motivator. I'm not a Brett Bielema guy. I didn't love him at Wisconsin, and I thought their coordinators Matt Canada and Paul Christ at the time were the true reason. And I still think the jury's out on that after his Arkansas appearance. But everyone and their mom's on UTSA, Brad. Just as a future perspective and season went to, I thought I was going to be on them back when I was doing them in May, and then I find out everybody else is on them. I'm like, oh, I think I like Marshall or UAB more now. That's kind of what I came up with, because I expected to get a 10-1 or 12-1 or something nice on that. I couldn't find that. I didn't bet it to win Conference USA. But even though I still have them power rated pretty well, but even where I have them, I still have them 3 points under Illinois. And I didn't even uptick Illinois much from last week. Maybe a half point I might have gave them from that impressive win against Nebraska. So I'm right on the spread. I was wondering what your thoughts are.
Yeah, it's another one. Unfortunately, I'm like right on the spread, and I just want to, I got beat up pretty bad on Twitter last week because I made, as soon as Peters went down for Illinois, I bet Nebraska. I laid it a couple times. I was able to find as low as -2.5 in game at that point because I thought Sikowski at Rutgers was a dumpster fire. I mean,
me too.
He came in there and played very well, but I just think it's interesting. Illinois greatly exceeds expectations last week. They beat Nebraska outright as a touchdown underdog. The look-ahead line for this game was trading Illinois -6.5. They greatly exceed expectations, and now you're 5.5. So, yes, Sitkowski was a downgrade over Brandon Peters. The market's telling you that. So, I would make that bet 100 times over. Peters went down.
Right.
I want to take UTSA, but everyone's on top of it. This is one where I take +7, but at a dead number of 5.5, I really don't want nothing to do it. I was impressed with Illinois. In fact, I bet Illinois against Nebraska pre-flop. I watched Illinois spring game, and they were like one team that like greatly exceeded my expectations watching. I thought, Bielema was not one of my favorites. I haven't saw much from Illinois under Lovie Smith the last couple of years. And then I watched their spring game, and I was like, whoa, this looks like an old team in a good way, meaning it's just a bunch of 21, 22-year-old men. And I thought they played like that against Nebraska. Not that they got a lot of talent at the skill position, but they won the trenches, in my opinion.
Yeah, and if they're going to win the trenches against UTSA, Sincere McCormick's not going anywhere, right?
Yep.
He's not running the ball.
I think they'll win the trenches, and that's the major question hang-up I have for UTSA. After watching Illinois against Nebraska, can UTSA hang in the trenches? And I'm not sure that they can. And if that's the case, then, that Illinois, that Bielema, Wisconsin style can really lean into them in the fourth quarter where you think you got a really good play on UTSA and then they just get wore down late.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way to talk me out of that too. So this is a watch game for me. Sorry, I'm not coming out with too many ones you had plays.
No, it's all right. That's fine. I actually like these because when I like doing these podcasts because I can sometimes talk myself into a bet or out of a bet.
Yeah.
Whether it's talking to other people or just hearing myself talk, and I'm just not BS and just hearing myself talk. I can usually talk myself in or out of bets, so no problems here. I love talking games like this.
Oh, well, fantastic. That's true. Talking yourself off of a bad side through talking it through is just as good as making a good bet in many cases.
Yep.
It's a loss or a win, and your losses are bigger because it's you're laying more juice. So, great point there. Let's move on to a huge game for San Jose State because they're playing USC. I'm actually interested in this game. I'm excited to watch this game. I really want to get a piece of it because I was on San Jose State last year in the Mountain West, and they did great stuff, great things last year, and they won it. And you have a total of about 59.5. And I'll just tell you right now, full disclosure, I do have San Jose State plus 15.5, and it did go down because they took care of business last week. And it went down about 1.5. It was, they didn't know where the market didn't know if he was supposed to be a 17 or a 14 at the time, and now they decided it's a solid 14. I don't know if this is going to move anymore, and I don't even know. Maybe at 13 it'd be a half buyback for me. Not sure. It does go past the 14.5, 14 to 13.5. The numbers say to do it, but the only way to look at this game is you can't really if you don't have any investment in it. How do you bet a Clay Helton team the first game?
Yeah.
That's the way you got to look at it, right? This could be an 8-point spread with the UFC, and I still would feel comfortable doing it,
Yep.
What are your thoughts on how this is coming in?
Well, I'm a 17 guy, so what's keeping me off of it? You hit the nail on the head. Clay Helton's keeping me off of making in normal instances, if I had a 3-point difference, I would be laying it right now. And I still lean that way, and I'm waiting to see if it does come off 14, and I'll make a big bet on SC. It's just pure power ratings for me. If I go into the handicap, that's where I start getting concerned because I think Keaton Slovis is overrated for SC. Obviously, Clay Helton's overrated, but I just think there's too big of a disparity between the two teams to say this should only be a 2-touchdown spread. And on top of it, I think SC is better on the defensive side of the ball, especially they got two defensive ends that can really get after the quarterback. San Jose State is off like an outlier type of season where it was great for them, one of their best seasons in school history. Keep in mind that was played against a bunch of Mountain West teams, so we didn't get a lot of data points with between non-conference last year. So I mean they're taking a major step up in class, in my opinion. But it does come what the trepidation of betting Clay Helton is the only thing preventing me from making a big bet on SC. But I do lean that way, definitely.
Well, your power ratings are definitely different in this aspect that I'm probably a little higher on San Jose State and lower on USC because I'm more in the 12 area. It's a big discrepancy there, 5 points, but it's early and we make adjustments in the beginning. But the thing, I do have a question that might pertain to some of this. Well, first of all, who's your highest rated team in the Pac12 South between Utah, USC, UCLA, and who's the other one? Utah, USC, UCLA. Arizona State, ASU, yep.
Slightly Utah is my favorite team, but not enough to overcome them going to the Coliseum where they haven't won in 100 years. I mean, I love Utah. I bet them a bunch over season win total. Bet them to win the Pac-12. But, I mean, if you're asking me who's going to win the South, I mean, I would have to say SC at this point because they get Utah at home. But Utah maybe a point ahead of SC in my power ratings. Both teams in the top 20. I have 6 Pac-12 teams in my top 30. I don't think there's a legitimate top 10 team, but, man, there's a lot of teams between that 10 and 30 range. 6 of them I have.
Yeah, that's a lot between the 10 and 30. So I mean, for me, I actually, believe it or not, have ASU a half point ahead of both of them, and I don't know why that is. Maybe I love Daniel.
No, I think without the distractions, why are they losing 3 assistant coaches? I don't think that's bad at all. I mean, when I watched Arizona State in the spring, I thought, being a little bit of a historian, this is the best Arizona State team I've seen since Jake Palmer was a quarterback.
Oh, it looks amazing, and especially the way they finished the season, just destroying their rival. I mean, now, of course, it's a rivalry, so they wanted to put a piss pounding on them, but there was just no mercy there, and they look fast. They look fast to me, that game, and I remember watching it and having the over, and I was really happy they got the over themselves. So this is a good question for you then, Brad. Being that teams played last week, like San Jose State, does this make you have any thoughts coming into the next game with the team that hasn't played? And does it matter if it's a Power 5 school or big school like USC? Or does it matter from the derivative markets at the halftime?
Well, that's probably the best question that I've been asked this week. And here's where it affects me. I see a lot of teams get bet on that looked impressive last week. San Jose State was certainly impressive. And I see the market really go towards those teams because, I mean, that's your only data points that you have on this entire season. And what I usually find historically is those teams get overbet in the marketplace. And, I put this in my newsletter this week. If you're going back the last 20 years, we're talking a couple 100-game sample size here. But if you bet against the team that already played and you're betting on the team that has yet to start their season, you're in like 54% over a 200-game sample size. If you're playing on a team just starting their season opener. And my conclusion is sometimes, and maybe a majority of the time, it's better to have game film on your opponent than to actually have played the game. So, I tend to think the market overreacts to what they just saw, like anything else, any other sport. Yeah,
and I think I agree with you, but I would wonder from a derivative market, like, are they going to be better the first half, and then
I would think maybe first half they might be better because the team that's starting off might be a little slow. So if you want to bet a San Jose State and you don't want to go against that trend line, take them in the first half. So I think you're on to something there.
All right, well, good stuff. Glad I asked that question then. So fantastic stuff. Great for our listeners to get that perspective from you, Brad. Really appreciate that. Let's move into maybe the biggest game of the weekend then. And I had to throw this
biggest game of the year.
Biggest game of the year. Could be. I mean, and that's how they schedule it. And I'll tell you right now, no matter who loses this game, it's not going to take them out of the playoffs. And that's for sure. And that's a cool thing because they're going to probably be looked at as, hey, Yin, you got in front of this team and you lost it. But, geez, I almost want to reward you for this 6-8 point loss or whatever happens more than anybody else because you played this game, especially if they have a great finish. But Georgia playing Clemson here. Neutral field, right? North Carolina, I believe they're playing in Charlotte.
Yep, Charlotte. Yep.
And this is Clemson with a solid -3. It's been around that. I think it's been around that number for a little bit. I think I might have saw a 3.5 or so pop, but maybe you can check the numbers again. The total on this is 51. I'll let you start on this one, man.
Wow. I mean, first off, it's the only matchup in the regular season where you got one, at least on paper, of 2 top 5 teams in my power rankings, not only in the polls. So, I mean, it's as good as it gets for week 1 or any week during the season. I'm not involved. Just because it's the biggest game of the week doesn't necessarily, and especially doesn't scream best value bet of the week. I certainly think Clemson deserves to be favored. I would lean Clemson. My numbers have them closer to 5. But I got some legitimate concerns, and it starts Clemson's offensive line, which was exposed against the Buckeyes, even in the first game against Notre Dame was exposed, is going up against one of the best defensive lines in college football. Jordan Davis is Clemson right now, the word is they're going to rotate centers. Oh, my goodness. I don't know if I want a Clemson bet if that's the case, but I also can't talk myself into betting Georgia because they're really banged up at wide receiver and tight end. Their top 2 tight ends are out. Well, their top 2 tight ends would have been a matchup nightmare for anybody. And why I think Clemson deserves to be favored is I think the Clemson quarterback's better. Uyunglele, I've seen enough from him to think he's even better than JT Daniels. And I trust Dabo Swinney more than I do at Kirby Smart at this point. So 3's a fair number. Pizza bet Tigers if I had to, but I'm just going to sit back and enjoy one of the best games we've ever seen in week 1.
It is going to be, and I cannot wait to watch this one and be focused on it. Now, Georgia did lose a lot of their defense, though, didn't they last year?
Oh, yeah.
I think they only returned 4 starters.
Yep, they did.
One thing I will say about Georgia is I like to go back, and I do this for every single team. I average the 3 years recruiting before. I don't count the 2021, though. I look at 18, 19, and 20, and there's going to be some outliers in 17 that are still playing, and there's going to be an outlier of a freshman coming in that's going to play. But Georgia is averaged 1.33 looking at 24/7. Looking at 24/7's recruiting numbers. That's higher than Alabama. Alabama's at 2.66. So, man, when you look at that coming in, and some of these kids having, some time to sit down and watch, their elders play a little bit, they can come in firing themselves. I mean, best recruiting I've seen from Georgia. Now, from a coaching aspect here,
yeah,
Kirby Smart is not a guy that I love to bet on. And Dabo is. Dabo really is. And look, from a quarterback standpoint, I remember JT Daniels at USC. He did pretty well last year, except for some of the big games. He did.
I was unimpressed against Cincinnati. I just was.
Me too. In Cincinnati.
I bet Georgia in the game.
Cincinnati blew that game. They blew.
Yeah, they did. Since he should have won, and I bet Georgia, so I was disappointed with Georgia's performance. They were very fortunate to win.
Well, I got the spread, but I actually had the money line, which was a nice one on Cincy. It was
there. You go.
It's like at least plus 300. I couldn't remember. I mean, it was a small.
That hurt.
Yeah, I know. It was a sprinkler. Yeah. It was just a sprinkle. It wasn't like I'm making a solid play on the money line. I always go way bigger on the spread no matter what I do. I was like, why the hell am I betting this if I don't like the spread? Right? That's the way I look at it anyway. But, DJ Uiagalelei, however the hell you say his name, we saw a little bit of action out of him. And, he's going to be called DJ a lot this year, but we'll see if he spins like a DJ because they're always looked at one of the teams that are to beat. And I still think they are. And, this might cast them into, second place. I don't know where you have Clemson now. I have Georgia. I think I have Georgia third. Where do you have Clemson? I have Alabama. Oh, I have Clemson second. I have Alabama, Clemson, Oklahoma, Georgia, Ohio State.
That's what I got.
Okay.
Yeah, I have, that's exactly what I have. I have Alabama 1, Clemson 2, Oklahoma 3, Ohio State 4, Georgia 5.
Right on par with me.
You mentioned recruiting. I mean, 247 does this a talent composite where they look at your entire roster and it's like your team talent. And right now, Alabama and Georgia have the two most talented rosters we've ever seen in the history of college football.
Wow.
So, I mean, if I saw something like that, I mean, that would have me leaning towards Georgia. But again, Kirby and the quarterback, I think, are less than what Clemson has. And to me, that's everything. Head coach and quarterback is everything in college football.
Well, it's everything in a big game, and especially because DJ played a couple games last year too. He's not coming in completely green, right?
Yep.
So great call on that. And I really do have Clemson about a 3-point favorite anyway. So I'll be watching this with you, Brad, just enjoying it, and hopefully we'll get a great game. I don't want to blow out. I want a great game here. Well, let's move into a game that somewhat matches your attire right now, Brad. Now that you got the big ND on your head, Notre Dame, and Brad's big Notre Dame fan now, as he explained earlier, and it's a love-hate relationship with Brad. So,
oh yeah, it is.
My sister got her law degree there, and so my dad loves Notre Dame. He's kind of just one of those teams he loved as a kid, and we're Midwest, so completely understandable. He's from Chicago originally, but he still roots for him, and now they're coming down to Florida State, and Florida State's a very interesting number. And to be honest with you, it kind of lines up with what I have, but 7.5 points. It's really tempting you to take Florida State, and the total is about 55 or 55.5. Brad, you do the honors.
Yeah, so it's all about the numbers for me. So South Point opened Notre Dame -6. I laid it with the Irish. And then, like 2 weeks later, somehow William Hill comes out with Florida State 10.5. So I bet Florida State plus 10.5. My line's 9. So I actually lean Notre Dame. And the more I read about the fall camps from both teams, I lean more towards the Notre Dame side. And don't get me wrong, this isn't me being a homer. I mean, if you averaged out 100 bets, I'd probably bet against Notre Dame 65, 70 times, especially when they sucked for 20 years and were overvalued in the marketplace. But I like the matchup for the Irish. I think what's being underpriced for them is the inexperience. In a year where everybody's experienced, Notre Dame only returns 9 starters. So the market is really down on the Irish. And what they fail to miss is, I like the quarterback, Jack Cohn. I don't think he's that much of a downgrade over Ian Book. I wasn't a big Ian Book guy. I think the wide receivers, Notre Dame loses their top 2 guys. I'm here telling you they upgraded at wide receiver. They got more talent at wide receiver than what they did last year. So that's mispricing. I think the major question mark to me is the offensive line. And if it's okay, then they'll be fine. The defense side of the ball, I think Notre Dame really gets after Florida State's offensive line. And a lot of people are excited about Mackenzie Milton for Florida State, the transfer from UCF that lit the world on fire, a couple years ago. Well, I mean, reading that at fall camp, I'm not even sure if he starts. I don't think he's 100% healthy coming off those, 8-9 leg surgeries. He looked good in the spring game. That's what got everyone excited. But, I mean, that's where I think the mispricing is. And right now, I mean, I'm waiting because I think people are going to be really tempted to take that 7.5. And I'm waiting to lay 7 with Notre Dame. And it'll be probably a big bet for me where I'll, definitely overcome the plus 10.5 that I had on Florida State earlier this summer.
So you have an even middle going on 10.5 to 6, and you just want to open that up a little bit more at the side.
I'm going to open it up more on the Irish side. That's my preference.
No, that makes sense. So my question to you before I tell you what I was looking at, I haven't made a play,
okay.
But my question for you is, how good is this defense for Notre Dame? You did scare me a little bit without the Milton thing. I wasn't sure. That's something I didn't hear, so I appreciate that knowledge. Yeah. I mean, to be honest with you, when I watched Mackenzie Milton play a couple years ago at UCF, I thought the guy made amazing decisions. I thought he knew exactly where everybody was. Yeah. But if the guy's legs ain't working, nothing's going to work. So that definitely concerns me because I'm not looking at a side here. Is Notre Dame's defense supposed to be better than last year, you think?
It'll be about the same. I mean, they're missing some key guys. I mean, Owusu-Koramoah, who won the Butkus, is the best linebacker. They're going to miss him. They just lost a starting linebacker for the season. Lou Fowle is his name, a guy that I thought really was going to be their best blitzing linebacker. But I like Marcus Freeman, the new defensive coordinator. I think front 7, Notre Dame's top 10. The secondary leaves a little bit to be desired, but still, one of the guys in the secondary is Kyle Hamilton. He's probably, if he doesn't get hurt this year, is going to be the highest drafted safety in the NFL draft in the last 20 years. That's how good he is. So, defense is good enough. And I know where you're going to go, and I agree with you. Under, I think, is a really good, solid play.
Well, to be honest with you, I was looking at the over.
You're going to go over?
Yeah. Well, here's why. And I wasn't sure. Right. And I wasn't sure. But here's why, Brad. And I just be completely honest. I was looking at Mike Norvell a little bit. And I was looking at, and I know he didn't start out as fast because you don't do that with great players, but he was a very fast-paced coach. Like, he is. And so it makes you wonder, if they are getting beat, are they going to still, be playing fast and just getting beat by more points? You're looking at 55 points. And then you look at Mackenzie Milton. So that's where my handicap got screwed up. Okay. Is right when you said that. Because Mackenzie Milton played for one of the fastest offenses at UCF for years when he was there, right? And so he was used to that. So I was thinking maybe, that builds up a little bit. And then I'm thinking about Florida State's recruiting. And, the recruiting's fell off, Brad. But it's not like it fell off into the 50s and 60s. I mean, it's still somewhat there. There's still kids that want to be a semi, and I kind of expected. Well, is their line going to hold up a little bit? I like Jack Cohn, and I think he's on a little bit of a revenge tour after what Wisconsin did to him.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, and so I expect him to put up to light it up against this Florida State defense. So I was thinking speed. And I was thinking the Mackenzie Milton factor being serviceable, and I was thinking Notre Dame's going to score a lot of points and score when they want. So that's what I was looking at. So apparently you said under, so now I'm not liking it.
Well, don't talk me out. Let me talk you out of it. But I mean, what concerns me is both teams' weaknesses is their offensive line, and I could argue both teams' strength is their defensive front. Especially Florida State's defensive line is their best unit on their entire team. And that was my thought process after watching the spring game. And then the beat reporters at fall camp have kind of concurred that they've really taken advantage of Florida State's offensive line, which Notre Dame's defensive front seven is even better than Florida State. So I think when you ain't got it going on the offensive line on either team, and that's Notre Dame's weakness on their entire team, their offensive line, that could really cause some issues, I think. And I'm a guy who doesn't like to bet a lot of overs opening week. I just think teams feel each other out. But, I'll say this. If you want to bet over, I'd wait a little bit.
Oh, I agree. No,
I think
I
there's
agree.
more money going to come in on the under.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think you wait until, Saturday night after the night games are done. Because Sunday, people are going to have nothing to bet on. And, they're probably going to push up the over anyway. So I think Saturday night's a good time if you want to bet the over. I haven't made a total play on anything since last week, and I had a loser on UTEP's team total because they didn't have to score in the fourth quarter. Unfortunately,
the referees cost you in that one. I mean, both teams were moving the football a little bit, and then it got so sloppy. The referees wanted to make it about them. I guess I don't know. That game just came to a complete halt. It was ridiculous, to be honest with you.
It was awful, and I mean that was dead nuts in the first quarter, and then the officials came in, and of course the fact that New Mexico had 3 points, New Mexico State had 3 points coming in didn't help me. But that was I thought that was a sharper play for me over the 34, and I was pretty pissed about losing it. But
they took 2 touchdowns off the board for New Mexico State. I thought legitimately one was caught in the end zone, and then the other was called back on a penalty that they really couldn't confirm video wise. I mean, it just killed the game. If they score there, UTEP's going to keep wanting to push the ball down the field. I mean, for a game that went under by 4 touchdowns, I mean, just a couple of plays were the difference there.
I know, and I know some sharper people on the over on that total too, because I mean, they looked at it the way I did. I just wasn't sure if New Mexico State would score, but just the whole thing kind of conundrum together, and then it stopped there. But I lost by 4 points, so that it is what it is. But no. Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, that's the only over I took, and I'm pretty sure if I look at my card here that I took mostly unders for the week, and if anything, nope, I haven't made a total play this week. I just made sides, so there you go. Just made some sides, but didn't talk about too many of the games. Obviously, that the San Jose side with that 15.5 is the one I'm on right there. Is there any games that you would like to give out to our listeners and viewers?
Well, I'm going to give you one out that I haven't given to anybody, but it's something, when that line gets posted, I'm telling you, that's going to be one of my favorite bets of the entire week one. And here's why I'm not giving out bets, because I have worked over the board and then some. Between me betting, giving out plays weeks ago, and even giving out plays in my newsletter a couple days ago. I mean, I don't think you're going to have a lot of positive EV bets. I think it's flipping coins at this point. But one that isn't out yet that I really want to bet this game. I want Northern Iowa against Iowa State. Iowa State has Iowa on deck. They're not going to show everything. The whole world is in love with this Iowa State team. They're a traditional slow starter under Campbell. They're terrible against FCS teams if you look at the past. Northern Iowa has one of the best defenses, if not the best defense, at the FCS level. And I think this point spread, if you look at the Jeff Sagrins, the Bill Connollys of the world, hell, even my power ratings say this might be a 5-touchdown spread. My handicap line on this has it less than 4 touchdowns. So I think there's going to be a big disparity. Anything above 28 points, I think you got one of the best bets of week 1. So look for 28 and above on Northern Iowa, and I think you might be able to get 35 on them. Again, I'm just giving you probably my favorite bet of the week once it gets posted.
Well, we appreciate that for sure, man. And you going against Matt Campbell definitely tells me something right there. I mean, if you're going against Matt Campbell, and he's been, one of your favorite coaches over the years, listening to you. So, but that's just how much you feel.
Not as a big favorite, he isn't.
Yeah, that's true too.
I love him as a dog. He's a favorite this year, so I'm worried about them Cyclones.
Yeah, I know, and a lot of people. I was on him last year, and I had to hedge out of the championship game. I'm glad that I did. But, I think I had a 12-1 on them to win the Big 12, and, they just couldn't, under the pressure and everything, and they had it all the way up till they didn't at the end. And so, interesting cap, though. I like NC State's, and I'm going to like their team total. And it's good. Okay. It's good if they're playing South Florida. South Florida is a bad team, and this is a pretty big spread of 18.5. Am I somewhat concerned it could flutter out like New Mexico State? Sure. I mean, just a little bit concerned. But I think that USF, who's been a top 20 team in pace last year, is going to try to at least keep the game going. And if you watch some NC State games last year, this team's not that old NC State that just played with pure defense when Chubb and some of the other guys played. NC State's an offensive show right now. So it's going to be around 38, 39 points. And, that's where I definitely like it. Maybe up to 42, but that's the play I'm going to make. And I haven't told anybody about that yet either, buddy. So
I like it. I like back their offense coordinator was really creative. I like that you're going to want to play Devin Leary, the quarterback, after he missed most of last season after a hot start. I mean, they would have probably been better offensively if he played the whole year. I'm just not agreeing to agree. I really like that bet, and that's another reason why I like doing these shows, to get different thought processes.
All right. Well, good luck to both of us. So I'm definitely going to be taking a look at that line when it comes out against Northern Iowa, my man. Where could our listeners and viewers find your great information and plays, Brad?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at BradPower7, or you can check out my website, BradPowerSports.com. Weekly newsletter. If you're checking out tweets, I send out plays even via Twitter. But I write up every game, and I have it pretty much memorized at this point. So if you just forget the plays. If you just want information, I got it for you in my weekly newsletter at BradPowerSports.com.
Then that's why you're such an easy guest. You don't have to really look anywhere, and you got everything all in your mind, all in that Brad Powers head of yours.
Big fat head of mine.
Well, I really appreciate it, man. You guys make sure you check out Brad Powers. Follow him on Twitter at BradPower7, because I get a ton of free information just from Brad right there on Twitter. All right, my friends, now it's time for a little UFC on ESPN Fight Night 191. And we have a decent main event here, Derek Brunson versus Darren Till. And to be quite honest with you, the fight I'm going to give out is this fight. Sometimes it takes a while for a fighter to just figure it out. I mean, for Brunson, it seems to have taken, most of his career. He's 37 years old, but he's 22 wins and 7 losses. Still a great record. And you have Darren Till here at 18-3-1, much younger, 28 years old, great record, but he is kind of struggling a little bit. He's kind of in his funk, right? He's from England. He's a stand-up fighter for the most part. 10 KOs, 2 submissions, 6 decisions. His 3 losses were 1 by KO, 1 by submission, 1 by decision. But his last 4 fights is where he has his 3 losses because he stepped up in class. Yes, he beat Stephen Thompson. And Stephen Thompson is a tier 2, borderline tier 1, tier 2 type fighter, in my opinion. Thompson's been around. Thompson's a very good one. Before that, it was Donald Cerrone. Cowboy Cerrone, we kind of knew was at the end of his tracks in the 2017, 2018 range. So we got a lot of props for the Cerrone fight. But, then he loses to Tyron Woodley, who's lost a few in a row. He lost to Jorge Masvidal, which is fine. Everyone loves Jorge Masvidal, but besides Jorge's stand-up, he gets beat. Then he's getting a lot of credit for the Gastelum win. And that was in a split decision. Gastelum is losing to everybody right now. He was that Ultimate Fighter guy, reality star turned UFC fighter. Not much to the guy. And then Robert Whittaker, he lost in a decision. And, Whittaker, he's obviously a great fighter, but he also lost to Izzy. When I'm looking at both of these fighters, Derek Brunson and Till, both about 6 feet. Brunson might be 6'1", 185. Brunson's got the reach of 77 inches to Till's 74. Both of them are actually southpaws, and significant strikes land per minute. Brunson's at 3.46, and Till's at a small 2.27. You'd think that Till is a big grappler, but Till hasn't submitted anybody in a very long time, right? When was the last time that Till submitted someone? You have to go all the way back to 2014, when he wasn't even in the UFC. He's mostly a stand-up fighter now, right? So where does this big price come in? You're looking at takedowns. Brunson, 3.11 per 15 minutes to 0.54 for Till. That's a big difference right there. Okay? A big difference. And Till's coming in here as a massive favorite. If this one goes to the points just on the pure numbers side, I have to go with Brunson. And it's not like these guys are always KOing people in this higher level fighting. A lot of their stuff's going to decision. Robert Whittaker and Kevin Gastelum went to decision with Till. And with Brunson, 3 of his last 4 fights went to decision. So I think Brunson could win easily by points here if he doesn't get lucky and get a KO. I just think this price is a little bit off. I think Till, with his age difference, probably should be about a 140, minus 150 to plus 120, plus 130 type situation. So you're getting Brunson around the plus 155 area in a lot of these books, plus 150 I'm seeing. Smallest one's plus 140 that I'm looking at Bet Rivers. So I'm going to take a shot. I'm going to take a shot probably with a 1.5 on the main event here with Brunson. And I'm okay with losing this one because from what I'm seeing Brunson should get the points victory if he doesn't get lucky and get the KO. Everyone, thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Really appreciate you listeners out there. If you have any questions for me or Brad Powers or anybody else, tweet us at the OddsBreakers. Tweet Brad at BradPowers7. I hope you have a safe and fun Labor Day weekend. I hope you enjoy all the college football games. I hope you enjoy the fights. And go get some winners.